It is my great pleasure to be here tonight and to introduce Kristian Lander, who is a filmmaker, and he has been a producer and host for a number of podcasts, including Our Curious World, all sorts of mysteries and things that are deeply unexplained. He has a passion for the world of the offbeat and the Fortean, and he's been a member of ASSAP since 2011, so one of our longer-standing members. He has now produced 8 presentations by way of ASSAP webinars and has been a speaker at 4 ASSAP conferences. And we will soon be reaching 200 recordings, Kristian told me, or very nearly. I think this will probably make the 200th. So his subject tonight is a spooky one, and it is one that is full of mysteries, and it is phenomenal, if I can say it correctly, Phenomenal Nottinghamshire. So there you go, Kristian. Please take it away.
Thank you very much indeed, there, Kieran. Yeah, Phenomenal Nottinghamshire. There was quite a few different titles I was going to give this. I'll give you a bit of a background on what happened. So I started penning this as an article, really. This is where it began. So it began as an article, and I started putting accounts in from all the ones that I know across Nottingham that are kind of a bit out of the mainstream. You generally can go to most books, you generally can go to most news archives, and you'll find the same stories in Nottingham. And I didn't want to share those. I wanted to share something quite unique and have some interesting perspectives that a lot of people don't have, and certainly accounts that are not widely known or widely public. So I said to Caroline, I said, hey, I'd like to do this as a webinar. And she's like, yeah, okay, we'll put it. We've got clearly so many speakers over the next few months that I think it was going to be in March by the time I got to present this. So I thought, let me retool this, and I'll make it a series of podcasts or a series of articles with like 2 in each. And then I got a message last week, hey, can you fill in this week? You've got a presentation ready to go. And I do. So this is a kind of even fuller presentation than it was originally going to be. So hopefully you'll get to enjoy more of what is Phenomenal Nottinghamshire. So let me just share this screen, and we'll roll with this. And I guess the opening title really is kind of a summary of what I've just said. Is there anyone familiar with the ghostly tales of Robin Hood country? Kind of knows the famed haunts here. There's like the Gallows of Justice. There's the tortured souls who are in those, allegedly, those catacombs that are underneath there. Nottingham Castle has its eerie cries heard in Mortimer's Hole. And there's like the haunted corners and the trip to Jerusalem Inn and the Old Cell. There's even the mischievous gnomes of Woollerton Hall. So these sites are kind of iconic sites. They're well known. In fact, they're too well known. But they are kept at the front of Nottinghamshire's haunted lore. But instead of following these well-worn paths, I wanted to go off the beaten track. So join us as we delve into lesser-known local accounts and cover a unique blend of the uncanny and the bizarre across the county. And we're going to explore Nottinghamshire's most mysterious and rarely told tales of high strangeness. So, if stereotypes are to be believed, ghosts and phantoms only haunt houses occupied by privileged aristocrats. And whilst those opulent homes may indeed harbour memories, or perhaps the spectres of former inhabitants, our journey begins in a very different setting. It's a neglected corner of Forest Fields, which is a densely populated neighbourhood. It's at the heart of the city. It's a multicultural melting pot, as they say. But locally, it's quite an interesting place. Forest Fields is known as a place where there's always something going on. But in 1995, something otherworldly happened in the most modest of residential homes. And that is here at Lorry Close. Every Saturday, I take my walk to work, and I pass this close. I go past the end of it. And the location here in 1995, it didn't make national news, as though it kind of made local news for an account that is truly bizarre. So what we have here is a 19-year-old lady. Her name is Tracy Wilkin. Her and her partner, Darren Taylor, he's 21. They've recently moved in. They're in the houses on the right, by the way. I've took the specific shot, but not the Pacific house, although it is in the photograph. So they have started a new chapter. They have 3 young children, Kirsty, Chelsea, and baby Marcus. Their happiness, however, is short-lived. However, as soon as they came to live and accept that this was their home, it became the source of their terror, as light bulbs first started to mysteriously pop out of their sockets, and it wasn't uncommon for Tracy or Darren to walk into a room to find every drawer and every door wide open. You know, the poltergeist phenomenon. Most people are commonly associated with that. Sudden temperature drops are found send chills through the air, unexplained crashes and booms in the walls. In fact, it was described to me as the whole walls felt like they were pulsing or vibrating. They were almost organic, like they were actually moving. The whole brick felt like it was vibrating. So these people are bewildered, they're frightened. This whole family is struggling to make sense of the relentless disturbances. And their frustrations grew as they also questioned their sanity. And the enduring episodes then left them in constant dread. The haunting presence offered no respite. The phenomena could strike at any hour. The children's bedrooms are also not a place of sanctuary. There's one account of Chelsea. Of course, she's the oldest girl. She ran into her parents' room, and she says that Santa has come into the bedroom. So Darren is quite bemused at first, and he's like, well, did he leave you any presents? And Chelsea says no. She bursts into tears, crying, then describes how the figure, resembling Sir Nicholas, so possibly in red clothing, possibly with a beard, he pulled her hair, slapped her face, and disappeared. So the haunting has now become a physical intervention upon her. Tracy also had her own harrowing encounter as well. She woke one night to find a tall, dark figure looming me over the bedside, standing silently, kind of twisted and unnatural, looking down at her as she slept in her bed, well, as she woke up, rather. But in January 1986, the Evening Post, which is Nottingham's kind of major newspaper, reported that Reverend Graham Burton of St. Martha's Church in Broxter here, along with another clergyman, visited the home to perform a blessing, an exorcism, if you will. And as they stepped inside, the loud bangs then echoed throughout the house, reverberating the walls again. But through the prayer and the blessing, the clergyman appeared to quieten those disturbances. And although it's unclear to me how long the family continued to live there, it is known they moved out, but you can imagine that those unsettling experiences have left a lasting imprint on those in that area who also got to witness and experience those encounters with that family. Because they did tell people, because their neighbours were hearing this too. So let's also move to the southwest corner of the city. So this is going to kind of be lots of small little accounts like this, self-contained stories across the Nottinghamshire county. So from the Nottingham Hidden History team, they record in the Doomsday Book, they've documented, that Bramcote, which is formerly called Bruncote, as it was in the Doomsday Book, is a simple wooden structure that would serve as their place of worship before the stone church was built. That stone church you can see is on the right-hand side. The body of the church that consisted of the nave, there was a north aisle, and the tower date to the 12th century. And most people would say, why is it called the sunken church? But is it because the church is sunken into the ground? Well, actually, the answer is no. But the appearance gives it that impression. If you were to come to the church from one of the roads, it looks particularly like it is actually sinking into the ground, but it's a visual perception. It's a really quite striking building, in fact. The only thing left of it is the tower itself. It's the only thing that survives due to the general decay of the church. But in the autumn of 1978, there's a young PC, and his name is Graham Wilkins. He's patrolling the village of Bramcote late one night, and he's standing near the tower of the church, when a very distinct shape of a figure emerges from the darkness and surprised him. And he described how this figure had a dark cowl over his head. And Graham described how the figure then crossed the churchyard. And when he shone his torch at the figure to gain an understanding of his actions and what this person was up to, the figure appeared to go right through the character who had appeared. So Graham's instincts at this point, in fact, is to ring the encounter in. He picked up his radio. The person on the other end of the call actually commented to the Nottingham Evening Post with a kind of nice little wit line that's in the press that says he didn't have a ghosting chance of finding anyone. But the apprehension of the monk didn't happen, although an interesting anecdote here is that the vicar canon is a chap called Roy Williams. He's the Archdeacon of Nottingham. He's not dismissing Graham's claims of having seen a potential ghost at this church, certainly not one that looks like a monk, because in the historical records, there are no monks who were ever served at this church. So we'll roll through to the northeast side of the city, where we'll find let's go to the northeast side of the city. So we're going to go to Arnold. So Arnold is in the northeast section of our city. And there's an interesting chap there called Steve Bushfield. He is currently the editor of the Press Gazette Media Guardian, and he found himself at the centre of a poltergeist case. So he was working at the Nottinghamshire Evening Post. So upon repeated requests to investigate the strange events at Rolleston Drive, which is where Arnold Self Drive is located, Bushfield turns up. He's a preppy kind of reporter, doesn't really know what's going to be going on here. But as he enters the cabin that's at the Arnold Self Drive, and a ashtray is flung across the room at him. So he was instantly introduced to the poltergeist phenomena that was occurring there. There was a series of articles that then continued. The police had previously been called to investigate the loud bangs and thuds because they initially suspected there was youths with catapults. And one customer told Bushfield that I've been in that office, I've been hit with notepads, and I don't believe this is a hoax. And there's more. Although the reports of the eerie activity have since faded, the locals do acknowledge the site's spooky history. Many other poltergeist-like phenomena has occurred there over time, but these days, any misplaced keys is more likely attributed to human forgetfulness rather than a restful spirit. In that area, as I did a bit more research, I came across a case that is just 2 streets away, in fact, on Sandfield Road, where Denise Lee, she is a resident of number 90, former resident rather, and she shared her unsettling experiences on social media. She says it was like something else is living with us. Her youngest child, refused to sleep in one particular room, claiming that monsters would come out of the walls, and Lee has heard coughing and footsteps in the bedroom, and particularly on the landing upstairs. In fact, she rushed to the bathroom because she heard someone coughing in there, thinking it was her daughter, only to find there was no one there. She recalled also an incident where her eldest and her friend were mysteriously locked in a bedroom, and they were surrounded by the sound of shattering glass, and appeared to be coming down from the ceiling and smashing all around them, despite the fact that wasn't happening. So the sound of glass, but there's no actual physical phenomena occurring. Fortunately, the current resident of number 90, Caroline Key Hayes, says there's no unusual activity in the house today, but you can bet that she's, listening out for it. I also quite like another case from around this particular area. Again, it's just another street away. This is a very small, enclosed area of the city, where the Nottingham Guardian Journal documented a chilling case for the 1960s involving a ghost passenger. So quite different to the scary one this time. So according to the report, it's a double-decker bus. It's operated by Trent Buses and is travelling along the A60. The A60 is their main artery road that goes out of Nottingham up to Mansfield and out through Arnold. So the bus stopped at Redhill Cemetery to pick up a single passenger who boarded and then headed to the upper level. Of course, buses at that time, the stairs were at the back of the bus. So he gets on, goes upstairs, sits down, and the conductress, clocks the passenger, and she goes upstairs to collect the fare, only to find the upper deck completely empty. When she arrived, or rather when the bus arrived at Mansfield bus station, the bus was searched by police. She called the men who were at the bus station to come have a look, and but no traces of the mysterious passenger and fare dodger have ever been found. I quite like that story, actually. It's a soft story. As we go out of Nottingham City, and we were to take our way north, you will find an area of Bassetlaw, and there's a particular story here called the Dog of Beckingham. So Beckingham is a village, it's a parish, so it's amongst the oldest tales in the country of the Black Dog. As has been seen with so many ghostly canines, everyone here has probably heard a story of a ghostly canine. I mean, this one's quite an early one, and this one is always seen as black at night. It emerges from the cemetery and moves purposely down the road or running silently, and it follows a path towards the old boatyard before taking the south road and vanishing. There's accounts of a spectral creature that date back centuries. One story tells of a man determined to confront the mysterious dog, so he decides to stand boldly in its paths. His faith is his only shield, and with his outstretched arm, he demands to know, in the name of God, what business you, this creature, have here. But as soon as he spoke, he found himself suddenly paralyzed, collapsing to the floor, unconscious. He was later discovered trembling, and he actually would remain paralyzed partially for the rest of his life, and the lasting encounter with this dog. There's another legend in this particular village that is related to a black dog. In Buckingham's religious history, according to local law at least, in the 7th century, the lord of the manor was a staunch pagan and was known for violently resisting the Christian trespassers on his land. But when a priest arrived, he reached out to the lord of the manor's dog, who had came out to growl at the visitor. He actually responded. The priest put his hands out and went to scratch his belly, and the dog rolled over. Instead of the guarding the master, the ownership transferred to the Christian priest, the pastors who came to spread his message. So from that day forward, the priest took the dog as his companion, the creature then accompanying him to spread the new faith through, I guess, the kingdom at that time being Mercia in this area. But I think there's a religious kind of tone to that. Effectively, you have a transfer of ownership from a protector, a guardian, moving to the next faith, as it were. So, however, where folklore blurs with history there, I'm not sure, but I quite like that story. Now, this is something that's a little bit different, actually. So, although Annesley Hall is widely known as the ancestral home of the Charles Munster family, its grand history would typically steer us away. I intentionally said I wanted to stay away from the well-known locations, but the connection to Lord Byron and Nottinghamshire makes it impossible to ignore, with the poet's unrequited love for Mary Charworth inspiring his earliest verses, including the evocative A Dream of Annesley Hall, captured in that painting that you can see there. That's currently housed at the Manchester Art Gallery, and the painting portrays Byron hiding in the shadows, kneeling on a long bench outside the hall, and he's kind of leering in and sees the couples. Basically, they're having a ball. It's a lively ballroom scene, and he clearly is in adoration of Mary Charworth, who was turning her head towards the window, unaware that the poet is actually outside gazing in from the darkness. But rather than dwell on Annesley Hall's storied history, I actually want to take your attention to the stable block. And now, I don't know if you've ever been to this location, if you've ever seen Most Haunted Live. I was at Most Haunted Live. I was actually in the audience there. But let's head there. So this is what the stable block used to be, the entranceway, the guardhouse, effectively. This is to the left-hand side of the hall itself. There's basically on the other side of that, there's like a pathway that goes to the road. I'm going to talk about a kind of personal story, an encounter that happened here. There was an investigation I was a part of. It was held by Paranormal Investigations East Midlands. Present is Sean Mark Simpson, Mark Birch, Danny, and Neve. We were all crammed into a small car up the A60. Police were aware of our presence. In fact, 2 officers who we knew actually dropped in to meet us there, and they also wanted to share their stories about the location. And some of them were really interesting. But we arrive at Annesley Hall. It's past dusk. The hall is secured. Now, in 1997 and in 2015, trespassing ghost hunting groups. So trespassers who have gone onto these grounds, caused fires in these buildings, and these structures are now irreparably damaged, and as such, they are secured away from anyone going on site. This grade-2 listed building is never going to be reopened. Potentially, is going to just languish in its current state, dilapidated. But the ruin of there's a church that actually shares the same ground. It's on the left-hand side. So this ruin of Annesley Church is publicly accessible, and the stable block at the time was visible from the church grounds. This is where this picture was taken. And as you can see, all those windows and doors that are boarded up, when we went there, that was not the case. They were still open. And we were there as doing an investigation as such. We were doing like trigger object tests, EVP sessions, and just generally have a walk and a chat. And it's an interesting place. Because the place is now boarded up, then we have like urban explorers. There's continued trespassing there. People are constantly trying to jump over the wall. And as such, landowners are quite annoyed at anybody wanting to do an investigation there. The stable block, on this here, from this particular vantage point, from the first window on the left-hand side, the top, we saw collectively as a group, by one of us, a light in that window, and it basically moves through the building. It goes from that first window to the second, to the third, the fourth, and then it disappears just before that main arch, which was like the carriageway in. And so we thought, okay, it's probably a guard walking around the building, security guard, etc. Never thought anything else of it. So when we went down from the church, we go back to the main road, go up the path that's in front of that particular building, And we actually make an interesting discovery. There's actually no first floor there. You can actually see through all those windows at the bottom, looking up. The floor has entirely been removed or is burnt. The ceiling is exposed. The beam is above. So this light actually was a free-floating light, a bulb. And we thought it was a torch, but it shone out of all the windows as it went down. These beams of light came out as it went down this corridor, I assume, perhaps at one point. But so we were trying to debunk this effectively. The other side of this building is just forests that go back. It goes back to Annesley Hollow. There's this pure woodland there, and there's just a path that basically, as you go out that gate exit there, immediate left, it's just a path that goes back to the main road. Other than the forest behind, there's nothing there, so there wasn't any lights coming through. So yes, we saw a free-floating ball of light pass through 4 of those windows, and when we got round there was no first floor at all. An interesting quirk of that particular place. So let's talk about an interesting place in the centre of the city. For those who don't know, if you've ever been to Nottingham and you go to Nottingham Castle, particularly as a tourist, where Nottingham City Castle is located is just outside the city centre. There's a kind of a circular route around the city, which is Maid Marian Way and so on. The castle sits just outside of that, not far from the trip to Jerusalem Inn. Behind the castle is a private housing estate, and that's called the Park Estate. So it's actually privately owned land. So they own it as a cooperative. It's sort of secret. There's only 3 ways in, and it's formerly a hunting ground for nobility. There's limited access, as I've said. There's only 3 ways in and out. There's traditional gas-style lamps throughout. The whole estate has a kind of really cool Victorian Gothic aesthetic. No 2 buildings look the same. So when night happens, the mist rolls in. It kind of cloaks these streets in a kind of cold, silken shroud. The gas lamps flicker weakly against the fog, and their light stretches thin in the gloom. When somewhere in the distance you might hear the faint cry of a crow that cuts through the silence, only to be swallowed whole by this oppressive night. It's on nights like these where you can see your own breath. There's the ghostly apparition of a nanny pushing a perambulator, much similar to that one looking there. The nanny has a number of sightings that have been done for more than 100 years now, and her presence is quite unforgettable because she always appears to be wearing the same faded gown and the veil of time that's kind of clinging to her like a second skin. That's because she has wounds on her face. One wound is she appears to be stabbed through the cheek, and is also missing an eye, and there's no baby in the pram. There's phantom carriages and horses I don't know if they've been regularly seen. I think I heard of a case back in the 1990s where someone claimed to see the carriage roll through this particular area. And there's an urban legend that permeates the witnesses to the carriage will befall a death in their family. But a particular house was plagued by poltergeist activity of the highest degree. There was a number of unsettling reports that came from this. I'm aware of those accounts and who made them and who was on site for those locations, at that location, sorry. So this homeowner, who would regimentally retire at 8 p.m. every night, he found repeatedly rusty nails under the covers in his bed. This happened not once, but several times. The same homeowner also had an encounter with a spectral creature that had a bristling, untamed fur on the upstairs floor of his house. There was disembodied growls that appeared to echo through the landing in the bathroom. So this whole eerie atmosphere kind of permeated all the time. There was muffled voices that appeared to emanate from an antique clock, which this whole house had an unsettling aura. So each morning the owners would awaken and find the furniture downstairs overturned, arranged into irregular piles, quietly as they slept. There was no sound to this. Electrical appliances would also malfunction. They would break without explanation. Taps, however, would often be found running, despite the main water shutoff valve of the building actually turned off, and the drainage point locked and secured under key. This suggests, however, that whatever was responsible for turning the water back on either had used the key to turn it back on, or actually passed through the housing to reactivate it, because obviously it's in a plastic box. In addition to these occurrences, there was a white, sticky substance that was found oozing from the walls of the property over a 3-month period. Now, it's not known if this was analysed to determine its composition. But to bring an end to these disturbances, clergy were called on several occasions to bless the house and banish this presence, and it took more than once. Despite multiple attempts, I hate using the word exorcism that's in the reports. I tend to use the word blessing, because exorcism is very different to a blessing. The growling continued, but on the wall of the last attempt, written in pencil, is the words "Great Salvere," Latin for "willingly I say goodbye," and that was found on the morning after. So perhaps this is a final communication with a presence that he was unwittingly sharing his property with. So let's go out to a place that I'm very, very familiar with, Bestwood Country Park. So we really are going to go on a whistle-stop tour around the city. Now, Bestwood Country Park was famously King Charles's Royal Hunting Lodge, and it has various ghostly stories. If one approaches Bestwood Country Park, and I should have actually put a map on to show what this area is like, but I haven't got one here, you encounter a structure of its former mining heritage from the 1800s, and that was open until the 1980s. Along with Lodgewood House, that is Lodgewood House there in the picture. Today, that is a local ranger station office. Now, the account given to me, this would have been 2007. A gentleman who was in his mid-60s, I say, he claimed that he was on the Adventure Playground, that's the current Adventure Playground now. It wasn't like that back in 2007. Unfortunately, it's been burned down a number of times. So every so often, unfortunately, people burn down the Adventure Playground and it gets rebuilt. It's quite a sad story. This is not related. This account is not related to that. So the granddad said to me and the other two people who were with me at the time that he was pushing his grandson on the swing. His lad was 6. Before he decided to take a rest on a bench and take in the scenery, the grandfather then saw an interaction with his lad with seemingly no one. His grandson came then bounding over and said a lady with a fruit basket had offered him an orange. The lady gave it to me. When asking where the woman was, and he was looking around, the lad looked around to point to the lady, but there was no one around. And the walk path there is visible in both directions for quite some distance. And there's no way a woman or anyone could have walked off without me seeing them. It's worth noting that for those who are aware of Charles II's antics in Nottingham, there is a notable figure who he was engaged with relations with, and her name was Nell Gwynn. Now, Nell Gwynn was famous as an actress. She was known for her wit and her temper, and she was actually known as the Lady of Orange, due to the time where her and her mother used to work at the Drury Lane Theatre down in London, where they would keep the punters pitchers of brandy full and would sell oranges. In her accounts, I was quite fascinated by this. The way they used to eat an orange back then is you actually would eat it like a boiled egg. You actually would take the top off the orange, and then you would use a spoon or your fingers to eat out the orange. And I never knew that. But anyway, she became the mistress to the king in 1669, and she spent the rest of her life entertaining the king and his friends at the Bestwood estate, amongst other venues. In this particular area, there's a large number of pubs and stores that are called the Nell Gwynn or the Nell Gwynn stores due to her fame. On this street, in fact, the road that where I'm stood taking this picture, the road that is adjacent behind me is called Park Road and goes out quite some way into Bestwood Village. So when I first started calling myself a paranormal investigator, for lack of that term, around 2007, and basically because I spent a lot of time acquiring accounts, listening to stories, one of the first stories that was given to me firsthand was on this very road, on Park Road. There's a riding school there, and this lady described to me an encounter that she had on this road. And she described there's a hill that goes to the right-hand side. Perspective-wise, it's the hill that's at the right-hand side of Bestwood, of the lodge there. There's like a hill that goes up. She said that there was an exquisitely brand new black car there, a BMW possibly. She said it was immaculate, and it was there for a number of hours, and it was out of place. And she says she did a few rides through the park, and she decided, these two people inside were kind of creeping her out, and the horses would kind of react to this car when she trotted past. So she decided to go up, knock on the window, and go like, "Hey, what are you guys doing here?" I could see there was 2 people inside, so I walked up and knocked on the window. And the strangest thing, she says, it was like These two people were in suits. They were staring forward, and they weren't moving. They were like mannequins, as she described it. But the driver then turned, looked at her. He didn't look right. She actually said he just didn't look right. And then the car started up automatically. He didn't put his hands on the wheel and didn't move, but the car kind of engaged, drove forward, turned left, and went past her, the back of the horse. The horse kind of reacted to that and kind of backed off, and they drove off in the direction of Bestwood Village. And she said it was very weird. And when she came to describe what he looked like, he was like a doll. His face didn't look right. He sort of looked Asian, she says. Kind of looked, but he was like, had skin like it was wax. So it kind of hits that weird Men in Black kind of vibe. This area has had a number of UAP over it, but UAP can kind of move through the skies rather than a particular place. But yeah, maybe a Men in Black encounter in this very area as well. And then we come to a Bestwood haunting. This is an account that has not ever been made public, so I know that the story has never been told anywhere. But this place is as good as any to tell it, because I know I'm here with good people who have an interest in these particular cases. So this case began with two friends of mine called Mark Alchorn and Ralph Walker. And he reached out to me, and Mark's initial words were, "This is the real deal," and channeling the enthusiasm of Ginny Meltz. We've got one. You know, he was so enthusiastic on the phone. I had no idea what he was referring to or talking about in this case. And then he was just stumbling and mumbling over words of stuff that's happening at this house. So he says, "I've got to go over and meet this person." So this is the situation. It's a nurse. She's in her late 40s. And I'm going to refer to her as Sue. She had moved into her daughter's house, Louise, and she was renting a 3-bedroom property in Bestwood. Now, not long after Sue moved in, the household began experiencing really strange and unsettling occurrences. But the phenomenon was varied. So the incidents followed a troubling pattern. Items would move from specific locations and appear somewhere else, kind of causing confusion and frustration for Sue and Louise. It was things like car keys, things like the house keys, things like the wallet, the typical stuff that may well be misplaced. There was a persistent presence in the house. Both women reported feeling an unseen presence in the house, also including in private spaces like bedrooms and the bathroom. The first story that they really wanted to put across to me was the account of rolling marbles. In their bathroom, that was their toilet room, was located upstairs. They had a bowl, much like this one here. It has those kind of blue marbles inside it. They're on the windowsill, and it's up high. It's a kind of thin windowsill above the bath, above the sink and the toilet. But what was happening is that even though the bathroom door was closed at night or in the evening, the blue marbles would fall on the floor in the bathroom that they could hear, and then they would then roll down the stairs. Their stairs was a floating kind of staircase. Basically, it was in the living room on the right-hand side, and every step was you could kind of see the steps from the left-hand side. You could see them because they were kind of in the wall with just a thin beam holding them up, really. They placed a number of sound recorders and video recorders in place to capture this. None of the video recorders show anything, but the distinct sound of marbles rolling down the stairs is there a number of times. And these marbles would then fall off the bottom step and then roll across the living room, freaking Sue and Louise out because they were often watching television at the time. Just them two lived there. The dog's behaviour also had peculiar reactions, focusing intently on an area of the living room, which was the right-hand side, not far from the stairs. On one occasion, I personally witnessed the dog barking and jumping at the wall, and then it appeared to, like, the way the dog was at the wall, it was kind of barking at something, and it gets to the staircase, and then the dog is barking fiercely, looking up at the upper floor, as if something is actually there. The landing in this house kind of oversees the living room. So if you were on the landing, you could actually see a whole span of the living room. It's quite a wide, open, planned house. But Sue's bedroom became the epicenter for the unsettling activity that happened there. Figures were seen at night, sometimes reflected in wardrobe mirrors, and the sense of threat kind of drove Sue to start sleeping in Louise's room, where both women felt safer together, really. And there's one chilling account I'd like to share with you. She says that one evening, I came home, I was going upstairs, I was going to get changed, I finished my night shift, got home at 7:30, I stepped onto the stairs, and immediately I felt something, or someone right behind me. I ran up, and it followed. I could hear the footsteps behind me, boom, 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 boom. And then I slammed the door into Louisa's room. Whatever it was, it hit the door. It physically hit the door, and I just had to hold the door shut. And Louise is there watching TV in her room, and we are holding this door closed, trying to stop whatever it is on the other side from coming in. And we then got on the bed, and we were screaming, we were crying, and we could see the shadow of legs or feet under the crack of the door. Sue's bedroom also contributed to the eerie atmosphere. What she had was a tall... So if you were to walk into her bedroom facing you, was a tall, full-length body mirror, 6-foot-tall mirror that actually reflected the doorway. In the opposite corner was a hat stand, and there was dark clothes and a bowler hat on top. So oddly enough, wherever you sat in this room, you could kind of see the reflection of that in the mirror. So that was my first thought, that's what she was saying. But I'm jumping ahead of myself here, and I shouldn't do that. The bed is positioned centrally in the room, and around this bed was located 4 exposed light bulbs. They didn't have lampshades on them. 2 at the bottom of the bed and 2 at the top of the bed. So they were actually attached to the bed. And from the ceiling, there was also a really low-hanging bulb as well. So if you were sat in the center of the bed, you are in, effectively, the zone of all 5 of these lights that are extremely bright. On the left-hand side wall was 3 full-length mirrored wardrobes. So she had the kind of those wardrobes that were fixed into the wall, and it kind of had 3 massive sliding doors that were all completely mirrored. So this added loads of reflections around this room, and it was kind of unsettling just to be in there itself, just because of how strange it looked. Several members of the team who were in there, we all reported headaches when sitting in this room particularly, and likely due to these features going on. Like I said, there was a floating staircase that led to the first floor. The banister overlooks the room. Below the stairs, they had a large plasma screen TV, and there's an L-shaped sofa. So that's why the marbles were kind of rolling in front of them. And they kept saying that they felt that they would be looked on from above. So our intervention and our resolution here, we took a systematic approach to kind of alleviate this distress. We reconfigured the living room to eliminate that kind of looming presence of the staircase. We put a cupboard where the dog was barking at the wall. But EMF exposure, I'd never really bothered with EMF. Because like EMF recorders like the K2, because they are so debunked, I never tend to rely on them or trust them. But a tri-field meter, really interesting device. And I'd never seen it used in the way that I had done until I went to this location. Sean Mark Simpson from Paranormal Investigations East Midlands, he was in there and he was showing me this. The electromagnetic field readings on the bed were like 600 VM, which was like, I guess, the millivolts, was so high in this particular space that you can imagine the electromagnetic field potentially distorting the brain or giving some kind of a radiation sickness or some kind of exposure like that. So what we actually did, we replaced all the bulbs that she had, were the mercury argon gas bulbs, the kind of typical first generation bulbs that kind of were supposed to be healthy and not have incandescent inside them. So we took them away and put traditional incandescent bulbs in there. We turned around the wardrobe walls, so we actually flipped them around. So it was like the wood side coming into the living room. We encouraged Louise and Sue to establish a log for tracking events, providing reassurance, our phone numbers, etc. And we also suggested reviewing any medication that might contribute to their heightened anxiety. The next day, they had actually rang my friends. They'd rang Mark to say that was the best night's sleep she'd ever had in her life. She slept all night, perfectly straight, didn't see anything, didn't feel anything. So the cessation of the phenomena stopped entirely. Didn't happen. Nothing after that occurred. So was the transformation due to the physical adjustments we made, the calming structure and the routine we put in place? Perhaps a combination of those factors, perhaps because she had to make a log of these things. But anyway, they found peace and those disturbances ceased. But the case I find interesting, the fact that it can end like that. And I don't know of any poltergeist cases that do end abruptly. And I'm really interested to read more about those cases of the poltergeist stuff. But yeah, that was an account of myself going there. And I can remember being in contact with ASSAP at that time, following that story with them. So I'd like to take you now to Deanwood Crescent. So it's 1968. Now, 1968, so you got Captain Skull and the Mistrons is on TV. Randall and Hopkirk, deceased, has just started. But for Charles Hill, who's a local bus driver, he and his family were forced to flee their home in Deanwood Crescent in Bilborough. Now, Bilborough is a kind of former kind of working class estate. It's because all the houses have now, thanks to the right to buy scheme, most are now gone into private hands. But most look like this. The house in question is the one you can see there with the two cars. What happened? There was unexplained and terrifying haunting happening at this house. So there was relentless disturbances that led them to plead to the city council, who was sympathetic in their plight. So officers then promised to relocate the family to a new home and launch a full-scale investigation into the events that had taken over their lives. And the case remains one that is unsettling of the tales of the paranormal activity in the area. So it leaves behind some questions. So what happened? So Charles Hill and his 3 children moved into their home, Deanwood Crescent, in 1968, and the strange encounters quickly began to unfold. So Mr. Hill woke up one night and he described what he saw was a ghostly figure, clad in white, with a cloth drape around his neck, walking towards the upstairs window, the window you can see at the top. And he said it resembled a French Foreign Legion soldier. And despite dismissing it as a nightmare or a dream, the eerie sightings actually continued to happen, and they affected each family member in turn because they all went on to see this entity, this apparition. One afternoon, whilst alone in the house with only the family dog for company, Mr. Hill's daughter, Sandra, witnessed the apparition herself. The unusually calm dog growled at the stairs before Sandra saw a man come in wearing white trousers and a blue jacket, and he walked up the stairs to the second floor, and the figure vanished when she went to follow him. There was a sudden door slam upstairs, and meanwhile other incidents plagued the family. There was strange sounds that echoed throughout the walls. Fires went out, because of course these were coal fires at the time, so the cold breeze would chill the fireplace to the point that there was no heat emanating from it. And they kept having sudden illnesses, and they attributed this to the paranormal phenomena. So disturbing were the instances, the family sought the official help, and they secured a transfer via the city council, via the city homes, to move out. A doctor advised that the children should not return due to their fear. But even after the Hills moved out, the empty house continued to attract trouble, as looters had broke in and looted the gas and electricity meters. For those who remember back in the day, of course, 50 pence in the meter, these were coin-based. And Mr. Hill expressed relief to the Nottinghamshire Not Evening Post while he's now safe, and noted quite wryly that the thieves ignored the ghost, even though his family couldn't. Now, on an investigation of the haunting, neighbours had confirmed that a young man had actually once lived there 19 years prior. That he was a window cleaner who had taken a fall from a ladder and had left him then paralysed, unable to work. As feeling there was no other option, he actually entered his life in the upstairs bedroom. It may be, of course, a man wearing white trousers and a blue top, or dungarees, kind of painting and decorating kind of clothing might well be the expression of what he saw in that room. But to the owners who are there now, they haven't seen anything. So that does not continue to occur. The Old Salutation. Now, the Old Salutation kind of does sit as one of the favourite haunts in the city centre. Maybe because, as you probably noticed from that hair, I'm a bit of a rocker, actually. Quite like metal, quite like classic rock. And the Old Salutation is more affectionately known as the Sal. And there's plenty of rock nights there every night of the week. They have a rock jukebox, and then lots of live music there that happens. But also, the site has had more than 800 years on the site. I've seen Cromwell come through the doors, and King Charles II also has a snug there, where apparently he once was at one time, as well as more contemporary legends like Bruce Dickinson of Iron Maiden. The Nottingham Ghost Walk begins its tour here, along with the Main Merrion Way location, before making its way to the castle and the trip. So I'd like to tell you an interesting personal story about this place. So of the characters said to be within the cell, there's a young spirit who is known affectionately as Rosie. She's supposed to be an urchin girl, as this plaque there is dedicated to her. this is a blend of a personal and a first-hand account. Now, I would not say I've seen Rosie. I really haven't. However, I did react to something. I was at the bar. It was a busy Saturday night. My friends had gathered in the King Charles Snug, and I'm coming back from the bar. You kind of get turned around. You move around a bit. You're holding 2 glasses, 2 pints in your hand as you do. And I get spun around, past the toilets, and I'm going down to the Charles Snug. And as I turn around, I have to kind of instinctually raise my hands up, because as I'm spinning around, my peripheral vision, I think I see a small child run right in front of me, like it's like here. And I'm like, whoa. I raise my hands up, and I see, but I don't see anyone. I just kind of react instinctually to someone who I think is going to bump into me and my peripheral vision. Now, whether that was Rosie or not, I don't know, but certainly a child shouldn't be in the cell on a Saturday night. Now, John Crumbledore Colton, he's a member of the team at the cell there. He took my son Jace and I for a bit of a behind-the-scenes tour, leading us down deep into the caves below, far from the bustling crowds at the bar and the familiar attractions above. So as we ventured into these cold, damp tunnels, that's punctuated by a distant hum of the tram that kind of vibrates throughout the building. These subterranean paths, they are twisted, they are turned, there's lots of dark corners, lots of shadows. There's an interesting little kind of nook that now exists, where a curious tradition has kind of taken over, and they're taken root, and is growing steadily in more recent years. Strewn across this rocky floor, kind of nestled amongst all the craggy outcrops, is an array of toys, teddies, and dolls. Their colours and their textures they're kind of really in stark contrast to the stone walls that are surround them. So I thought these were in that one, but I didn't think they were in this side one.
No, they keep them in there because apparently this is where they brought Rosie to die.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I never heard that.
This is the closest film there is with lying down amenities. It makes sense.
Okay.
It does. But yeah, that's why the last got trampled by horses. Apparently she's one of the most prominent ghosts down here. People leave like scratches down their necks and everything like that.
Okay. It's almost like an improvised shrine where people are offering something to this little girl who appears to be the spirit there. So locals and visitors have taken to leaving these offerings of these toys. And there is now quite the collection there. I mean, that is a snapshot there, but it's along a whole place where you can sit down. This wall has maybe 14 feet long, and there's toys all the way along, all the way around. So I think this is quite whimsical and poignant at the same time. I think it's a testament to our urge to want to connect to something that's mysterious and intangible. And another story here is that I've called it the other end of the table. So Dylan Knight, who's one of Nottingham's kind of premier storytellers and a good friend of mine. So there's myself, there's Dylan, there's maybe 8 or 10 of us. We gathered around a table at the cell, and we're sharing stories on a spooky night, much like tonight, where we're gathered here. And we then decide to go to the trip. We kind of leave and we go through Castle Gate on the way past the Robin Hood statue. And the collective is kind of like, are we missing someone? And the 3 of the party then all describe someone who is at this table who none of us recognised and none of us saw. This person, he had long dark hair, had a leather jacket, so he certainly wouldn't have been someone who was out of place at the cell. Effectively everyone got quite perplexed. Apparently he was sat to my left on this bench where we were sat. I didn't see anyone there. I never knew there was anyone there, but we all collectively recognised that we were missing somebody. And this party was now smaller than it was. And so it actually made for interesting and excellent conversation that night. Now, as I can see, our time is rolling on, so I'm going to make a bit of a whistle-stop tour through the next stories, if you were to bear with me. So I'll take you to George's Lane in Calverton. It's a winding route, it's unlit, it's eerie trees that arch over the road as you see here. It's home to a number of reports and spooky goings-on, that they include basically a mysterious figure who appears in the back of people's cars, allegedly. It appears as a black robe, has been seen on several occasions since the 1930s, with a hood masking the face. Apparently he has a long hooked nose, and it has spooked those who have been walking this way as well. And there's a figure in the reports in the 1930s, a figure chased a resident there called Mr. Lawrence Bardill for some distance, and he was then ill for several days afterwards, and he attributed it to these spooky figure that haunts this particular road. In 1977, there were eerie hanging mists that happened on this particular road. This kind of swirling black vapor that was reported to the health ministry, effectively. They were actually worried about what it was. Like coal mist, effectively. But these country roads are prone to thick patches of fog, so it's perhaps not paranormal at all. In 1992, we found an interesting case, certainly poignant for myself, because villagers Bill and Alison saw a pair of legs, wearing white riding breeches running along this road. They'd had no upper body. So maybe I was not the first person to make the Nottingham Nightcrawler. Apparently, it was just a pair of trousers running along the street like the Nightcrawler. So clearly I wasn't the first one. Now, had I known of this account, I would have included it in my documentary. But alas, these things happen. It was actually put down and described by officials and those who were very sceptical. Perhaps it was mistakenly a duck or a swan, because it was identified from out the window of a bus that was travelling at speed along this road. It is said kind of locally that taxi drivers will deliberately avoid this road. I can attest that I've spoken to a driver this past week who also said that's the case. They don't take this road, but it's out of safety because the road is kind of winding and there's no lights there. Paranormal Investigations East Midlands, comprised of Sean Mark Simpson, Mark Birch and Neve, they travelled to this location and they did a number of runs of this road. And what they found, actually, they found a homeless encampment in the side of the road, in the bushes. It looks like it's been there for quite some time. They found a homeless person, a vagabond, stood at the side of the road, wearing quite dishevelled, effectively, and they thought they had found the ghost. They actually got out of the car. They went and spoke to him. They didn't realise why he was still there. They went and prodded him and poked him to see if he was actually real, and he was. And then he showed them their camp and they had a cup of tea. Maybe the ghost is actually potentially homeless people that has been misreported over time. But they did notice in their report that as a visual matrixing phenomena, because the amount of turns that are in this particular road, the kind of directional arrows that via left and via right, the black and white ones, if you keep your eye on them as the car is going at speed, it kind of looks like there's a person in your rear view peripheral vision stood there moving with you as a kind of matrixing phenomena as that happens. In Hucknall, that's not too far from Calverton, in fact, there is a story that's kind of related to this, but it's a far lesser known story, and the account was only told to me in a pub. There's a road there called Papplewick Lane. In 2007, the account was given to me by a resident of this road. We're there in the station hotel one evening, and she says that she was driving at the time between times, as Owen Staten says, where the sun's descending and there's that remaining light, and she looked up to see in her rearview mirror a carriage cart with two black horses behind her car, keeping up with the car, but she decided to slow down and move to the left to allow them to pass. But then it looked like the horse and carriage hadn't made the turn as well, and she thought they were going to plough into the back of the car, so she kind of braced herself, closed her eyes, fearing the worst, but then it didn't occur. Then she looked up, and in front of the car now was the two horses and a floating driver. The carriage had gone, and they just ran ahead into the road. There was no sound, only before to just disappear in front of her. Now, as we go through our whistle-stop tour now, as I'm going to plough through these quite quickly now, let's go to Langston. Langston is far north of Nottingham city centre. It's quite far out, actually, going past Mansfield. But the story here, in fact, I'll tell you a memory of this area. It comes from Frank Moody, who wrote a story, wrote a book, actually, and within that there is a local poem. Brockulo Bridge is where boys we caught frogs. This, they say, was haunted. But what was most feared was Bollenbeck Lane, with a real active ghost, Peggy Whopper her name. No one knows how she died. Most people think murder, and some suicide. That comes from a book called My Lifetime of Memories in Langston. So Langston is famous because it's the last village in England where the medieval open field system still survives. Mr. Reg Rose of Lilac Farm has had a lifetime of interest in farming and the surrounding countryside. So he began the Langston Heritage Museum on his farm as an international attraction. As a young boy, Reg spent much of his time with the elders, learning as much as he could. I've fond memories of the people. I've had memories here, of people who were born in the 1850s experiences of more than 100 years ago. From these old characters, I also heard stories of local legends and local ghosts. From the accounts that Reg had gathered, people would go miles out of their way not to meet the ghost of Peggy Whopper. She was a young farm girl, and she was murdered on Boldenbeck Lane, near a bridge that is now affectionately known as Peggy Whopper's Bridge. That's the one you can see at the bottom there. Travellers passing the bridge suddenly felt uneasy. Horses would shy away, sometimes throwing riders away without warning. Another notorious spot for unsettling encounters was between Parsons Hill and Brocolo Bridge, where there is a reported sighting of the Brocolo Boggin, a large, ghostly, wolf-like creature. Many, including the storyteller's father, claimed their horses would sense the presence of the creature, even when they could not see it. And the Boggin is part of local law, inspiring men to offer protection to women who are walking home alone from the dances of the Dovecote Inn. And David Haslam, who is an author of the Ghosts and Legends of Nottinghamshire, makes the point that the particular use of the term boggin here is a kind of local dilection rather than part of the boggart phenomenon. He describes it here as something very, very local as a story. Again, I'm just very conscious of the time, so I will slip ahead very slightly here. The story of the travelling companion here at Worksop and this particular old ship inn is the kind of precursor story to what effectively is the Phantom Hitchhiker story. So it's a gentleman who is he's going to Worksop. He's on a carriage, he's on a dog cart effectively, and he's making his trip there. And he decides to pick up a tramp who basically is just begging him beside the road. Hey, could you take me the rest of the way? So he's nice, he's kind, and the gentleman jumps onto the back of the dog cart. He sees the gentleman, his hands are withered, his face is dishevelled, and he's wearing a red scarf. But before he reaches the location of Worksop, he turns round and he notices his passenger has gone. He's not there. He gets off and he sees if he's fallen off. Did he jump off at any point? He's not there. Didn't get that. Didn't know where he went at all. But when he arrives in Worksop, he basically pulls his cart up. He pulls into the location that you can see there, the old ship inn, and it's considered to be the location for this. If a man comes this way, he's a tramp, he's wearing a red scarf, would you still give him lodgings for the night? I'll give you some money so he can have a good night. Did you say a man with a red scarf? Come this way, sir. And he takes him to one of the side rooms, and in this side room, laying down, waiting for the coroner to arrive to verify the cause of death, is the same man that he just gave a trip to, complete with a red scarf around his neck. And I think that story is from, again, I'll skip through this story ever so slightly. I wanted to kind of delve into a motion here about vampires in Nottingham. There is a bit of a history going on here with vampires, in fact. Nightbreed used to be a location in Snedson Market, kind of specialised in kind of a gothic rock and metal vinyl CD, as it says there. I went in there one day. It was a place that I would pass by pretty frequently, and I was always curious about the name. It looked how it does there. Nightbreed across the window. The style is quite cool. So I went in one day, and the guy behind the bar is playing. I don't know what I say bar. It's like a record shop, and there was a couple in there. This couple were very gothic in their clothing, and we all got talking, got chatting, and that's when this gentleman and this lady told me that they were vampires. Look, that's what they said. My anthropological brain, being only 17 years of age at the time, and I'm very curious about what they are saying. What do you mean you're a vampire? Buffy is on TV at the moment. I bet I take him at their word, and perhaps naively, I go home with them. I go to their house. Again, it's that kind of anthropological kind of action. And we have tea, we have a chat. They're a very nice couple. And they say, so we start asking the conversation, so what do you do as vampires? Are vampires rich? Yes, we are true. Vampires. The lady gets out a knitting needle, about knee long, and then she gets the guy puts his forearm up, and he puts this needle through his arm, and then it starts dripping out, and she holds a chalice underneath it, and then she takes a drink of the old blood of his. In retrospect, really dangerous. Went to a strange location, strange house, and met vampires. But yeah, and it was very, very fun. Again, 17 years of age, perhaps not the best story to have done. The Nottingham Topper. In 1996, there's a newspaper the topper. It's like a freely advertising newspaper. It's quite common. There's a particular story that I have been unable to locate ever since, even used in the British Newspaper Archive. I can't find this paper. The front page was that the Nottingham Castle was looking for a replacement vampire hunter on the front page, or on page 3. And the story was such that the Nottingham City Council employs a vampire hunter as a kind of an honorary role. This guy was in his 70s, the story said, and he was looking to retire and wanted someone to take his role as a symbolic role, where basically on a nightly basis he would walk from the castle down Mortimer's Hole and through a number of the network of caves that are there. In more recent years, I used to have that newspaper and I kept it. But when I moved out of my mum's house when I was growing up, it's been lost to time, and I've been unable to find it ever since. I've gone back to the castle and the city council, and they say that never happened. That story is not true. We've never employed that kind of role. We've never had a person who's had that position, even as an honorary role. So what was in the newspaper? Was it an April Fool's joke? I've no idea. I'd love to get hold of that copy of the Nottingham Topper that I used to have and had for some time. Let's skip ahead to the next one. Because again, I'm just conscious of time. Talking of vampires, so there's a book I did have over here. It's called Folklore, Nottingham Myths and Legends, and it's written by a chap called Wayne Anthony. Wayne, I've actually always wanted to meet, actually. It sounds like an interesting guy. He's written a fantastic book. Book's highly recommended. In that book, there's this picture reference here. It says, Nottingham has a number of stories, these creatures stalking in the shadows in search of victims. And some say the reason why vagrants are scarce in the county is because of the presence of vampires, including the strange sighting of a large winged creature flying over the market square. This picture here is a photograph I took myself. This is Nottingham's Market Square. I have never, ever been able to find the attribution of this story, and Wayne has never replied to me as yet to where this account comes from. I cannot find it. Apparently, so we don't have any vagrants here, because apparently vampires eat them and kill them. So I'm going to skip this one. The River That Claims Souls. You'll have to watch my... I will talk about this one, however, because this is a very quick one. This is St. Peter's Church in Radford. The parish of Radford is an inner city kind of church, basically. If you were ever to walk in this particular area, this church is very, very large. To the right-hand side of it is Castle Retail Park. You would miss this if you didn't know it was there, though. But in 1969, there was a strange occurrence going on here. Doors would open on their own, and on one occasion, a very heavy candlestick mysteriously flew across the room with no apparent cause or ability to do so. The vicar at that time was a Reverend James Lemon, who actually remained unbothered by these oddities, even as they happened in front of the full congregation who gathered on a Sunday morning. During one sermon, the vestry door near Lemon started to rattle, and as if someone was on the other side. And he goes, "Hey, choir boy, would you mind just coming over and checking who was on that door?" So he unlocked the door, opened it. Apparently there was no one on the other side. On the other side of that is a door going to the outside that also was locked. In another instance, a loud crash revealed to be that of a brass candlestick that had somehow moved from the communion table next to the altar of the church itself at the front. This had apparently then had moved over some wine, and then had landed in the third pew row next to a lady who was blind, who was praying, obviously, for healing or whatever she was doing on that particular day. So beside this person praying, that's where the candlestick had landed. And it's only because of the crash that the Reverend officer came in and saw this. This got reported to the Nottingham Evening Post, who then did a story about this. They interviewed him. Hey, what do you want to do about this spirit, was the question. And he says, well, he referred to his faith, that he says it should not engage with spirits. So let it have its fun. It's probably one of our congregation anyway. I like these little small little stories. I will tell this because it's my story. There's a documentary on YouTube called Spring Heeled Jack in Nottingham. So, and let's tell you about it, because I think I think we're coming up to about now. On the corner of Quarry Lane. Now, Quarry Lane is in the little village of Limby. Limby is, I would honestly say, it is the Fortean village of the country. Every kind of phenomenon that is in the Fortean Library of Phenomena has happened in this village. Everything from apparitions to UAP to weird folklore, and odd traditions. This village has them all. Thankfully, I appear to have spoke to everyone who appears to have had one of those encounters in this particular village. But let's talk about Quarry Lane. So Quarry Lane is, on the picture that you guys can see there, that is actually the Southern Cross located in that village. And the village literally is only this long. It's quite a small village. Very expensive to live here. Quite a few £1 million homes on the right-hand side. But this Southern Cross here is considered to be, in 1663, which is on the crest at the top of this cross here, is what was once the boundary of Sherwood Forest. Underneath this particular cross here is a flowing river of water, like a fountain of water, and it's believed to be holy. And during the time of the plague, people would come here to get water because they believed it was blessed by God to protect them. There's a second village cross in this particular village, and it's the only village in the country to have two. And the other one is actually located next to the Horse and Groom, which is the white building you can see to the left of that cross there, is where the Judgment Cross is located. It was called Judgment Cross because that's where people were if you stole goose, or say if you stole a goose rather, like you would at Christmas maybe, or you were a bit naughty, they would potentially come down and dish out that punishment while you were there. Quarry Lane is immediately to the right of this Southern Cross here and extends all the way up to Weir Mill. And that beyond that, of course, you have Newstead Abbey. So, as you've perhaps already read in the top right corner there, that is a map. So this is a local legends map that is located opposite the Horse and Groom, which is, again, is that white pub there. And on there is a number of stories. As you can see, pancakes are believed to originate in Limby. At one time, the Danish came through here, and all the men had fled, and all the women of the village decided to gang together and to liberate themselves from their Danish invaders. And they believed that pancakes were baked to honour those women. The wolf tree myth and story is here. Basically, a wolf ate their baby while they slept under a tree, which the tree is located further along to the left of the Horse and Groom there. And Spring-Heeled Jack. So Spring-Heeled Jack, of course, is that weird kind of story, of course, of that Victorian gentleman who apparently could leap between buildings and run up walls. He had the ability to breathe blue fire, allegedly. I personally believe that he was some kind of acrobat, perhaps with a travelling circus. Hence, he had access to potentially firecrackers and so on. And I think there's an embellishment by the media. But that's my personal opinion. The story here, I think, is an attribution to him and his ability to walk in these long strides. Along Quarry Lane, what was discovered by a number of miners, obviously from the quarry, was footsteps in the snow, left and right. They were 20 feet apart, so it would stride left and right, and they appeared to have been a ghost, as they say, a ghost of Spring-Heeled Jack, not Spring-Heeled Jack himself. But the ghost of him was then seen bounding along this particular field into what effectively is known as locally as Devil's Wood. Again, that's the woodland area around Weir Mill, which used to be the home of Sophia Hyatt, who was quite obsessed with Lord Byron, as you may or may not know. If you ever come this way, definitely visit this village. Lots of interesting stuff happens here. How about the ghost with the flame red hair? How about that? So the manor house is believed to be haunted. This is the house that is at the centre of Mansfield Woodhouse. So in 1929, a lady called Betty Cartwright Taylor, who was then 17 at the time, awoke one morning and shared a chilling encounter. She awoke to find her sister already downstairs. And as she lay in bed, perhaps just looking around the room at the opulence that she lives in, she was suddenly aware there was a lady at the side of the bed who had stunning, flaming red hair, who had appeared at the bed beside her. And her instant reaction to this stranger in her midst was, "What do you want?" But this woman then simply vanished, disappeared. Now Betty, in contemplation, held her composure, fearing that her family would mock her. She kept quiet on the matter and didn't tell anybody. But then years later, she met former residents of the house. They were called the Need Sisters, who had resided in the hall until 1911. And they had mentioned that the manor had had a ghost, and the description of the apparition was a lady with flaming red hair. Another eerie encounter happened many, many years later. It happened to a butler who was left alone in the house one Sunday whilst the family were attending church, and he was taken aback while preparing a buffet in the dining room. An unfamiliar visitor had passed through the hall and he gave quick chase after this person, ascertained the nature of their presence, and the description of this person has a striking detail. One you might already think you might have the answer to, and you'd be right. It's a lady with flaming red hair. And our final story is Shadows from the Well. This is an account also from Wayne Anthony's book, Haunted Nottingham. And it comes from a person, as an account in this book is attributed to a person called Jason. And he lives in West Bridgford. But I've heard a remarkably similar story in an area called Strally, which is to the east of the city. Perhaps it's the same account given, perhaps it's a different location. But the story is thus. So Jason's new home stood on the grounds of a former manor in West Bridgford. It's a well-to-do area, grand houses, sprawling gardens to the south of the city, the other side of the Trent. His bedroom window overlooks an old cottage garden, and the centrepiece is an ancient well encircled with worn stone walls. It actually used to be a vital water source for land, and is still functional today. On one night, whilst his wife was working a night shift as a nurse, Jason awoke suddenly, wide-eyed, and the moonlight was beaming in, filled the room with a cold, radiant glow that made it impossible to sleep. Now, assuming the brightness is what was disturbing his rest, he rose to close the curtains. But as he glanced into the garden below, something caught his eye. Several dark, moving shapes in the moonlit shadows. Now, he was intrigued, he was uneasy, and he was taken aback by what he saw. He saw 6 to 7 large hooded figures gathered around the well, and they moved strangely, creeping, crawling from the depths of the well like creatures born from shadow. Their limbs appeared to be unnaturally wiry, insect-like, spider-like extensions that seemed to bend at impossible angles, and the tallest figure was looming over them, appeared to be waiting for them to come out of the well, and they had kind of clawed-shaped hands, and they had glowing eyes that pierced the night. So the dread of Jason at this point is to run through the house and turn on every light, turn on the garden lights, turn on all the house lights as he hurried to do so, in absolute terror about what he was seeing. This appeared to cast away the moonlight shadows, and the rest of the night he slept with all the lights on in the house. And he said it was a feeling of total dread accompanied that experience, so he didn't want to have or feel this any longer. But it's a story that I've found repeated across the city, in at least a couple of places, one definitely in Strally, so whether that's attribution from the same person, I don't know. But I'm clearly just waffling through here, so let's draw this to a close. Thank you very much. My name is Kristian Lander. This has been haunted, spooky, paranormal cases from across Nottingham that most people don't know about. And that was my aim tonight, to tell stories that are beyond the typical ones you might hear of the Galleries of Justice and the Nottingham Castle. It's far much more interesting places going off. So thank you very much for taking the time to listen to me here tonight. If there's any questions, I will be thankful to take them.
Well, thank you very much, Kristian. That was a wonderful talk and a whistle-stop tour around a very great many places. So my first question really is, with all these different places, all these different hauntings and various other phenomena, do you think that Nottinghamshire is more haunted or Fortean or whatever than most other counties in the country?
I've heard that attribution to be the case. So I've heard that mentioned to be the case, that it is considered to be the most haunted place in the country. I don't know. I don't know whether it has anything more, anything less than anywhere else. I think clearly we have a rich folklore of a cross between folklore, haunted stories, local legends, local myths, all bleeding into each other. And I think if you go to Derby, you go to Dorset, Somerset, Edinburgh, the cases clearly are quite replete of strange, weird anomalies going on. So I don't think it's any more or any less haunted, but perhaps you do have to dig into your local community. You do have to dig into your local county stories to find the ones that are not necessarily in the books. You have to actually dig into the archives, as it were, to find them.
Thanks. I think that proves the point that the more you research, the more you find. So research is a really good thing to do, because it gets you out, it gets you doing things, and of course the more you do it, the more you find, and hopefully the more you learn, and the more people will give talks like this. So that's a great answer. A couple of other small things before I go on to the questions that have come up in the chat. The first one being that you mentioned the Bramcote Church, which is